Hey everyone, and welcome to the tutorial series for the Procedural Park. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to use the landscape material layers with our individual park objects. And you'll see here when we look at the coverage, we're going to be looking at how to use the park material, the pathway materials, and the central actor and the prop materials. And if you've seen the quick start guide, you've already know what exactly I'm talking about. And I've even shown the park material in the previous video, but I wanted to make a specific video addressing how to use all of the different layers with your park. So the very first thing I do want to show before we jump into using that is that with this asset, you have a landscape material, and I'm going to click here on the landscape tab, that already has several layers. So if you click on landscape, click on paint, you see that we have 4 different layers here. We have the first layer, index 0. Remember, we always start with 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, called procedural. And this is the default layer that spawns grass and spawns a rock texture on the slopes. So if I were to terraform this place, you'll see, if I go to sculpt here, actually start sculpting, notice that when I create a little mountain here, based on the slope, only the flatter areas will get grass and the more steep areas will get a rock material. I can also go back to here and use the different layers to paint on my landscape. The first one here is Foliage Removal, and if I just go ahead and do this, you see that all it's done is it's removed the foliage from this area, but you still have the grass texture. And if you wanted to eliminate this, you have to paint over it pressing Shift. And that's basically removing that layer, so you can see. You also have a path layer, which is basically like a little dirt texture. And you have a sand layer, which is basically, obviously, a sand texture. And you can use this in your park as you see fit. If I go back and paint with the procedural texture, then it's basically erasing this and it goes back to grass. If you have other assets in the marketplace, like the landscape auto material, there's actually several really good ones. They're going to have a bunch more layers here, and they are all compatible with the park. However, everything's set up with this simple material with the layers, so it works out of the box. You will have to make some small changes to include another better material, quite frankly, but the process is going to be the same. So the first thing we'll look at is the park material. So if you go under Setup General, there is a section here, like I mentioned before, called Park Material Details. And right here, all you would need to do is select your landscape, and then you select which material layer index you want to populate the park. And remember, the index starts with 0. So 0 would be the procedural. This would be 1, this would be 2, this would be 3. So let's say that I want my park to be sand. I can just change the layer to number 3, right? That would be the sandy layer. And if I go down here and say apply park material, notice that now the entire park is changed, and now we have a sand material. But notice that the grass is still there, and that's because we have to force Unreal Engine to update the material. The way you can do this is you can click on your landscape, go into landscape material, click on this little icon here. It'll take you to the actual material instance in your content browser. Open it, and all we need to do is change a setting. And you can literally check and uncheck a box. That's how I usually do it. Press save, and now you forced Unreal to update the material. And now notice that the grass doesn't have any. The sand doesn't have any grass. So you can see here. So now our park is sand, and you can go about your day. If this is what you wanted, you can go about your day by spawning your central actors, your pathways, your props, pretty much anything else that you would imagine is here. Everything would be there, except that now your park is grass. Simple as that. Or you can say, no, I actually want my park to be the grass layer, but maybe your entire landscape is a desert. So what you can do is you can come here to, let's say, the sand layer, you can click it, then right click and say fill layer, and it'll fill the entire landscape with that texture. And in this case, it will be like a desert, all sand. And then I can come here and say, I want now my park to be the grassy area. So you select layer 0 and press apply park material. And now look at the park having the grass material. And just like before, we force Unreal to update the material. And now when we zoom in, we have actual grass. So usually you probably don't need to do this, but depending on your landscape, maybe you have like a frozen landscape or a really mountainous landscape, and you only want a specific material to be the base material for your park. And this is exactly how you would do it. You will use that function. All right, I'm gonna go back and fill the layer here to the default. All right, and now everything again is full of grass. The next one, if we go back to our PowerPoint, is going to be looking at the pathway materials. And again, this is very similar, same thing. When we spawn our pathways, right, if we spawn our central actor in our pathways here, notice that our pathways are just splines, right? You can select one of these spline points and you can move it. But if we hit play, you'll see that the grass meshes are kind of peeking through the pathway. It doesn't look good, right? So we want to make sure that we apply a material along the pathway that eliminates the grass. And if you click on any individual pathway, you'll see that we have a bunch of options here. We have a setup option, which we've gone through in another video. But if we go under the setup landscape, we can now actually select the landscape here. And we can say which landscape layer we want to apply around the pathway. In this case, the default is layer 2. And if I click apply material, and we zoom in here, notice that now we have, let me go ahead and update here again. We have a dirt layer applied all across our spline. This is super useful because otherwise, you would have to manually apply it by literally painting it like I did it earlier. So we can apply this material layer and make it like a little dirt path, and now we don't have any grass. Notice that we can do each individual pathway separately. So if I wanted layer 3 here, say for example here, and I say apply material, whoops, not this one here, but this one here at the bottom. And I say apply material, and I would update this. Notice that for this specific path, we have a little sand texture, while on this one, we have a dirt texture. Now, you could do this manually one by one, but I've included a button here that does it automatically for all the pathways. Now remember, it's going to do it to the default value of that's included there, the default value. So the default value is the dirt texture. So if I click on apply path material, notice now that all of the paths have applied the material for the dirt. And you don't have to manually do it one by one. But what if you wanted the default to be the sand material? Then you would have to go into the actual class, blueprint class, and change it. So if you go to Procedural Park, Blueprints, Tools, Pathway, there is a base pathway class, BP generic path base. And if you open it here, you'll see that we have under setup landscape, we have landscape layer material index, and by default is number 2. You can change this value to whatever default you want, and that would automatically change all of the other values. All right, and that's how you would do it for the pathways. You can also clear the material, and when you hit clear material, it will basically go to material index 0, and notice that we now go to the grass material. So you can do that. You can apply it again, and you can clear it. And you can do the same thing if we go back to our PowerPoint with our central actors and our props. And the reason for that is because they're using, again, the similar functionality. So if I wanted to use this actor here, whoops, to apply a dirt material, right? You can see that all the pathways are dirt, but I wanted this to be like a little dirt area here. I can do the exact same thing with this selected under Setup Landscape. Click on Landscape, select your landscape, and select the layer index that you want to use. In this case is 2, and you can press Apply Materials. And notice now that we have the entire area with a dirt material. And when I deselect, you can see now that not only are the pathways using a dirt material, but when you get here, you get this nice little area with even more dirt. All right, so you can do it manually for each individual actor. We're going to do the same thing here, but instead of layer 2, we're going to do layer 3. And layer 3 is sand, just to kind of hit the point home. And when you go ahead, you can see that now we have a sand material for this prop, for the central actor. However, the pathway is dirt. And if we go ahead and spawn our props, the area props have the exact same option. You select them, you go into Setup Landscape, you select your landscape, and you select your layer, and you can click on Apply Materials. They are the exact same options because they have the exact same parent class. And you can see that now we have a little dirt area around the bathroom and a little dirt area around the Ferris wheel. I'm not including buttons to do all of the props and all of the central actors because I figured that's a little bit more nuanced. You probably want to have more control, but you can do it manually, and you can select, by the way, many props at the same time. And notice that you still have the same options here. So you could do it all at the same time as well. All right, that is pretty much it, guys. This is how we're using the landscape materials. Remember, you can change the defaults by going to the generic classes, and that way you can adjust it to your own custom material. All right, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video.